By the way, look at my t-shirt. Imagine you have a static shared code base. It's being used by 1,000 of your clients. Now, each of your clients, or at least some 10 to 20% of them, have special requirements. They need hooks in your code, such as, for instance, when you are deleting a database, CRUD entity from that particular table, and that is supposed to trigger some external event in some third-party system, which is unique and dynamic code and changes from client to client. Now, to implement something like this using C# or Java or, God forbid, C++ or something, or even Go and Python and PHP for that matter, will take you a lot of effort. And that is because of its lack of dynamicness, combined with the complexity overhead that object-oriented programming implies. So, I mean, the number of classes and interfaces and God knows what you have to create to simply solve that problem is going to easily take you a week, maybe even more of development. I'm going to do that now in 9 minutes and 50 seconds. And I guarantee you that you wouldn't be able to pull this off in any other programming language, maybe possibly Lisp or Smalltalk or something like that, ignoring those guys. You'd easily need to spend hundreds of lines of code and probably days or even weeks of software development. And I'm going to do that in 9 minutes. Now I'm going to show you something that's, at least as far as I know, impossible to do with any other programming languages than Hyperlambda. Now, instead of me explaining what I am about to do, let me show and tell. So first I'm going to need a database. I'm going to call it events. Then I'm going to edit this guy. I'm going to add a table. Callbacks, name, string, code, string. So now I have a database with one table and 2 fields. Now let me go to Hyperlambda Playground. Data.connect events, data.create table. Let me keep my database open in a different tab so that I can have a look at it. Name is callbacks. Values, name, some event. Code. Let me create some code here. Log.info, hello from event. And then let me transform that and assign it to code. And then here I am creating a record. Code, let me execute it. So now if we go back into SQL view and we do select all from callbacks, you will see that we have one record with a name and some code. Let's call another event some event 2, and then let's change its Lambda object. Also, hello from event. Let's execute it. Now you see we have 2 buggers down here. Now what I want to do, I want to take this database, and I want to get the database DDL, and I want to export it to a module. What this produces for me, if I open up HyperID, then you will see now all of a sudden I have a new module. It's called events, right? Now at this point, of course, I could generate an API. Actually, let me do that for kicks by choosing the events table and apply only admin and root, being allowed to invoke these endpoints. At which point now, if I go back to HyperID, I have CRUD HTTP endpoints to allow me to create, read, update, and delete into this table. And I can post here, for instance, you know, some code and a name, etc. And I can, of course, invoke the get endpoints that will return all events in my system. So now what I want to do, I want to create inside of this events/magic.startup folder, I want to create a new Hyperlambda file. I want to call it invoke callbacks.hl. And then I'm just going to close this. I'm going to write slots.create. And then at this point, I want to have a mandatory argument being name. And then I want to validators.mandatory. Then I want to do a string concatenation. And I want to apply a %. And then I want to do data.connect events. What's the name of the bugger, wasn't it? Events, and it's get callbacks, yes. And select code from callbacks where name like name. Save it, execute it to create my slot, open up Hyperlambda Playground, which point now I can signal, and I can pass in name being, let me see, what we had here, some event, which will return no such table, no such table, callbacks. Which will, now if we do a lambda to hyper, log.info, save it, execute this guy, open up the log, we will now see that this guy strings concat some events, data select like, we name like, arguments name, and we're not doing that guy, we're doing strings concat. So now basically what I have a function that allows me to execute an arbitrary amount of functions. As you can see here, it returns all of these code segments. What I now need to do inside of this guy is that I now need to transform for each data.select. Now I need to transform the code field for every single record in my table into lambda. Hyper to lambda. TP hash asterisk, what was its name? Code. So now inside of this lambda object now, I have the currently iterated code snippet as a lambda object. and I can actually execute it. Invoke minus save function F5 to execute the guy. Now, if I actually execute this function, what is happening now is that it invokes the first Lambda object, and then it invokes the second Lambda object. I've just created the ability to execute events. Now, if I have, let's say, I want to inside of this guy here now, where is hyper-ID? Let's say I want to do callbacks delete here now. Upon delete, maybe I have an arbitrary number of listeners that are interested in the fact of that, you know, I'm about to delete callback bugger. Okay, what I can do here now is that I can do this, invoke callbacks, save it, can delete an item, callback ID 1, and now it's just dynamically executing my code from my database. So I've now created the ability to persist code in database. Then I have namespaced my code, allowing me to execute multiple functions with one function invocation. Everything is 100% dynamic in nature, arguably allowing me to create plugin type of functionality where I have a dynamic aspect-oriented database code snippet table, where every single snippet inside of that database table is dynamically executed upon invocation of some other piece of hyperlambda code. So basically, you might argue, implemented a message broker in hyperlambda in 9 minutes and 51 seconds. What I just showed you now is a highly useful thing. It's something that I am using every single day. And it actually replaces almost every single design pattern that exists in this world because of its dynamicness. And this is a feature I can use to implement client-specific domain business logic type of code that I attach to a rigid and static code base without modifying the original code base, allowing me to take an off-the-shelf product and turn it into a custom software development project without changing the core foundational code from my product. That is a kick-ass feature.